The Peculiar Miss Pickett by Nancy R. Julian. Carol and Bobby stood and watched at the front window for Daddy to drive up with the babysitter. Mother was all ready. She was standing by the hall mirror now, taking her gloves off and on and combing her hair once more. Carol turned. "You look very nice, Mother," she said. Since Carol was watching Mother, Bobby was the first to see Miss Pickett. When Daddy had stopped the car, he came around the door for the tiniest little old lady Bobby had ever seen. Her snow-white hair was piled high in a knot at the top of her head. Her tiny face was almost hidden behind a pair of black-rimmed glasses. Bobby saw her put two dainty feet in the strongest, pointed, high-buttoned shoes on the curb and reach for Daddy's hand to lift herself out of the car. Miss Pickett stood by the front gate while Daddy returned to her enormous brown suitcase out of the car. Bobby could tell it was heavy because Daddy was having to pull and tug to get the big suitcase out of the back seat. "They're here," Bobby announced, not taking his eyes from the strange scene. Carol turned back to the window in time to see Daddy still struggling with the heavy suitcase, while Miss Pickett waited impatiently at the gate, tapping a pointed toe. Then, while both children watched, Miss Pickett quickly took off her glasses and gave the gate one hard straight look, and the gate flew open. Miss Pickett daintily put her glasses back on her nose and started towards the front door with tiny, careful steps. Two pairs of eyes at the front porch window opened wide, and two small mouths popped open in surprise. What kind of lady was this who could open the front gate just by looking at it? By the time Miss Pickett had reached the front door, Daddy was close behind her dragging the heavy suitcase. Mother opened the door. "Come right in, Miss Pickett," Mother said. "I'm so glad you were free to come. Charles and I seldom go out in the evening, but when we do, we like to have someone with the children when we go. Carol, Bobby," she called, "come and meet Miss Pickett. She's going to spend the night because Mother and Daddy won't be back till late." "You brought your things, I see," Mother said, watching Daddy struggle through the doorway with the enormous brown suitcase. With one final effort, Daddy set the big black bag just inside the front door. He took out a handkerchief and wiped his forehead while Mother talked on. The children had an early supper, Carol's already had her bath, and as soon as Bobby's through with his, they may have milk and cookies that are set out in the kitchen. They know bedtime is 7:30. The cot in the children's room is made up for you. Just make yourself at home. When Miss Pickett spoke for the first time, "We'll get along just fine," she said in the strangest, sweetest voice. "You two run along now and have a great night." "Good night," Mother said, giving the children a quick kiss while Daddy held the door. "We'll lock the door as we leave. Charles will drive you home in the morning, Miss Pickett. Any special time?" "I'd like to leave by 6," the strange, sweet voice said timidly. Though Bobby and Carol could see that Daddy thought that was a horribly early hour, Mother smiled and said, "Fine. Good night again." The door closed and the children were left alone with Miss Pickett. "Now, young lady, will you show me to where I'm to sleep?" Carol nodded her head and started down the stairs. Miss Pickett started towards her heavy brown bag that Daddy managed to get just inside the door. She quickly took off her big glasses, just long enough to give the suitcase a hard, straight look. Then, putting her glasses back on her nose, Miss Pickett picked up the suitcase as if it were light as a feather and started for the stairs. Bobby walked behind the tiny old lady who was daintily carrying the great brown suitcase as Carol led the way to their bedroom. When they reached the room, the suitcase fairly jumped on the chair beside the cot where Miss Pickett was to sleep. The children watched while the tiny little lady unpinned a key from the belt of her dress and opened the suitcase. "I'd like to get out my nightgown," she announced softly as she opened the bag. Miss Pickett lifted a bright blue nightgown and a pair of tiny bright blue slippers. Bobby and Carol moved closer to peek at what the curious bag had inside. They were almost close enough to see inside the brown suitcase when Miss Pickett suddenly closed the lid. As she did, a strange green cloud of smoke puffed out of the suitcase and went right into the children's eyes. It didn't hurt, but Bobby and Carol's eyes were immediately filled with tears. They rubbed their eyes to clear the smoke. Curiosity killed the cat, Miss Pickett said sweetly as she locked her suitcase and pinned the key back to the belt of her dress and left the room. Now, young man, will you show me where the kitchen is and your milk and cookies? Miss Pickett called. Bobby came quickly, still rubbing his eyes, and Carol followed. Together they went down the stairs and into the kitchen. While Miss Pickett placed the 2 glasses of milk and the plate of cookies on a tray, she spoke to Bobby. Young man, run ahead now and get your bath. I'll bring these up to the bedroom. Mother usually fills the tub for me, Bobby said, before he thought twice. She does. Miss Pickett looked thoughtful, then daintily took off her big black-rimmed glasses and looked once straight at the ceiling. The bathtub's filled now. Run ahead and be quick as you can. But, Bobby started, the bathroom's upstairs, and we're in the kitchen, and... Never you mind, the sweet voice answered. The tub's filled, and the water will get cold if you don't hurry. Bobby turned and trotted up the stairs. Too many strange things had happened already this night for him not to wonder if the tub had really filled itself. He threw open the bathroom door, and there really was a tub full of water. His towel was on the chair beside it, all ready for him. Meanwhile, Carol was in the kitchen with Miss Pickett, summoned all her courage to ask, How did you make the smoke come out of your suitcase? My dear, Miss Pickett answered, I was born during a thunderstorm. Carol didn't quite see what that had to do with the smoke or the suitcase or the bathtub strangely filling with water, but Miss Pickett said no more. With the tray in her hands, the little old lady started up the stairs. Miss Pickett had put the tray on the bedside table and sat down on a chair between the 2 beds. Into a bed with you now, the 2 of you, she said softly as Bobby came into the room, pink and shining from his bath. But, Miss Pickett, Carol complained, it's only 7:15, not nearly 7:30. It will be, was all Miss Pickett would say. When the children were in bed, the little lady handed them each a glass of milk, and Bobby remembered suddenly. Mother always opens a window before we go to sleep, he said. Which window? The soft voice asked. And how far up? She opens that one over by the desk about halfway, Bobby said. But he noticed Miss Pickett wasn't getting up. She only turned to face the window by the desk, and she slowly took off her heavy glasses and looked straight and hard at the window. While both children watched, the window raised itself exactly halfway. Drink your milk now, Miss Pickett said, putting her glasses back on her nose as she turned around to face them. I don't really like milk, Carol admitted, but I'd like a cookie. No cookies till you've had some milk. Then Miss Pickett noticed Bobby wasn't drinking his milk either. The 2 of you don't like milk, Miss Pickett said sadly, as if there was no worse thing in the world. Well, what do you like to drink? I like chocolate malts best of all, Bobby announced. Carol always has a strawberry soda. A chocolate malted milk and a strawberry soda, Miss Pickett said as she took off her big glasses to look once at Bobby's glass of milk and once quickly at Carol's. Now drink your milk, she said, as she put her glasses back on her nose. Bobby took a sip. Hey, it's chocolate malt, he said in surprise as he took another big gulp. And mine tastes like strawberry soda. Oh boy, Carol said, sipping happily. Soon the glasses were empty and back on the tray. Lights out now, Miss Pickett said. But it couldn't possibly be 7:30, Carol complained. And then looking quickly at the clock on the dresser, she saw it was exactly 7:30. She snuggled into bed, too surprised to say another word. Bobby, who was happily full of chocolate malt, pulled up the covers to his chin and lay back to think over this amazing evening. Carol, he whispered, leaning over the edge of his over the edge of his bed. Did yours really taste like strawberry soda? But from over in the dark, they could see a shadowy Miss Pickett getting into her own bed. A voice said, No more talking now. Good night. In the morning when the children woke, the cot was neatly made, and there was no sign of Miss Pickett or her big brown suitcase. Downstairs at breakfast, Daddy asked, "Did you two get along all right with the new babysitter?" "Oh, yes," Bobby answered. "Miss Pickett did the strangest." But then he stopped in the middle. Did the bathtub really fill with water while they were in the kitchen? And the window really raise itself? It all just seemed too magical. Certainly Mother and Daddy would never believe it really happened. Mother stopped his thinking. "What time did you get to bed?" "We turned out the light at exactly 7:30. Carol was sure of that, but she was too confused about Miss Pickett and her strange glasses to say any more. "Well, that's fine," Mother commented. "Next time we go out, we'll have to call Miss Pickett again." "Oh, yes, do," both children said at once. The Magic Shoebox. "Hello again," Mother said, smiling as she opened the door for Daddy and Miss Pickett. "I'll get my coat and be ready. You didn't bring your suitcase, Miss Pickett?" "No," the tiny little old lady answered. "I brought all I need in this little shoebox." She held out a small box that had been tucked under her arm. Bobby and Carol thought Daddy seemed much happier that Miss Pickett had not brought her big brown bag. "The children are all ready for bed. I told them they might finish the jigsaw puzzle on the dining room table before they go to sleep. The cot in their room is ready for you. Charles will drive you home in the morning, just as before. Anything else?" Mother thought a minute while Daddy held the door. "I guess not. Good night." And the front door closed behind them. As Miss Pickett turned towards the stairs, Bobby and Carol each took a long, careful look, just as before. Little Miss Pickett had her snow-white hair piled high in a knot at the top of her head. She had the same pair of black-rimmed glasses and was smiling the same sweet smile. Was it possible that this little old lady, just by taking off her big glasses and looking straight and hard, had made a window raise itself, or a glass of milk change into chocolate malt? Words that came tumbling out of Carol's mouth before she could stop them. "Miss Pickett, last time you stayed with us, you made green smoke come out of your suitcase, didn't you?" Miss Pickett looked at Carol in the strangest manner. Her look seemed to say, "Where do children get such odd ideas?" And then she smiled and spoke. "If we have our secrets, then they must stay secrets. Now I'd like to get out my nightgown." As Carol and Bobby followed Miss Pickett up the stairs, they noticed she was carrying the shoebox very tenderly. For the first time, they saw that small box was tied with heavy string and knotted again and again. Miss Pickett placed the shoebox on the chair beside the cot and began to untie the string. There were too many knots, and the tiny old lady grew impatient. Quickly, she took off her big, black-rimmed glasses and looked straight and hard at the knotted string. Quick as a wink, and all the knots untied themselves, and the string flew off the box. Placing her glasses back on her nose, Miss Pickett opened the little shoebox. She took out her bright blue nightgown, her tiny bright blue slippers, a comb, a brush, and a rather large mirror. She lifted out a soft, fluffy pillow, a large box of hairpins, and her toothbrush. How much could come out of one little shoebox, Carol thought, but remembering Miss Pickett's words, she asked no questions. Miss Pickett took Mother's pillow off the cot and placed her own big fluffy one in its place. "I like to sleep much better on my own pillow," she said quietly. "Now let's see about your puzzle." The large jigsaw puzzle almost covered the dining room table. Right after supper, Bobby and Carol had started working on it, but it was hardly half finished. Miss Pickett watched while the children studied the puzzle and placed 3 more pieces. "It's supposed to be a picture of a sunrise in the mountains when it's finished," Bobby announced. "Here's a piece of the sun, but I don't know where it goes." They worked at the puzzle for almost half an hour. Oops. Then Miss Pickett suddenly noticed the clock on the wall. "Gracious, it's 20 minutes after 7. You two must get upstairs to bed," she said. "But Mother promised we could finish the puzzle," Carol complained. "The puzzle's not half finished yet," Miss Pickett said firmly. You couldn't possibly have it done by 7:30. But Mother promised, Bobby said. Miss Pickett shook her head, but said nothing. She took off her big glasses and looked at the puzzle straight and hard. All the pieces on the dining room table jumped right into place, and there was a picture of sunrise in the mountains. There, Miss Pickett said as she placed her glasses back on her nose. The puzzle is finished. Now upstairs and to bed. Bobby and Carol, too surprised to say another word, started for the stairs. They had just reached the top, with Miss Pickett a few steps behind them, when a loud knock sounded at the front door. When Miss Pickett opened the door, there stood a strange old man. From the top of the stairs where Carol and Bobby stood, they could see he had a long white beard that touched the top of his bare feet, and he held something heavy over his shoulder. He was dressed in a long white robe and seemed to have come a long way in a hurry because he was quite out of breath. "Your Highness," he said to Miss Pickett, and bowed low. Miss Pickett gave a little nod. She seemed to know this strange old man very well. "What is it?" she asked crossly. "I told them I was busy tonight and not to be bothered." "I know, but the sun, Your Highness, is terribly confused. Did you want the sun up now? The sun had some idea that it should be over the mountains now, that you wished it that way," the strange man said breathlessly. "Oh dear, no. This is night time. The sun's not to come up till morning. And that was only a children's puzzle. Wait here a moment, and I'll send the sun a message." Miss Pickett turned and ran quickly up the stairs into the bedroom. She ran right past the children as if they were not there at all. She opened the shoebox again and took out the largest book Bobby and Carol had ever seen. She laid it on the bed and turned to a page near the back. Quickly she read the page and then rushed past the children and down the stairs to the door. "Tell the sun it is to come up at exactly 5:34 in the morning. No sooner, no later, and please don't disturb me here again," Miss Pickett said to the old man. "Yes, Your Highness, 5:34, he said, and suddenly disappeared from the doorway. "It's exactly 7:30, Miss Pickett said, before she even turned around. "Into bed with you two." The tiny little old lady made sure the covers were pulled up, said good night, and turned out the light. But just before the room became dark, Carol stole a glance at Miss Pickett's cot. Sure enough, there was that tremendous book still open on her bed. When the children woke in the morning, Miss Pickett was gone, and there was no sign of the big book Carol had remembered. Downstairs at breakfast, Daddy looked up from his newspaper. "Sleep well, you two. You did a great job on the puzzle. How was Miss Pickett last night?" "She was fine," Carol answered. She helped us with the puzzle." Bobby's eyes brightened. "Daddy, look in the paper and see just what time sunrise was today. Please, I want to know." Daddy found the section that reported the weather, tides, sunrise, and sunset. He studied for a moment and then said, "The sun rose this morning at exactly 5:34. "That's just what I thought," Bobby said, giving Carol a wise look. The glasses are lost. Mother very carefully explained the plans to Carol and Bobby. Daddy had to drive to Greenville on business the next day, and she was going along to do some shopping. They would leave right after the children were off for school and wouldn't be back till dark. Mother had arranged for Miss Pickett to come in the afternoon and stay, but it might be after bedtime when they came back. But Miss Pickett had stayed with the children before, and she knew just what to do. The next afternoon, when Carol and Bobby came running into the front yard, there on the porch stood Miss Pickett. Her snow-white hair was piled high in a knot on the top of her head, and her big black-rimmed glasses were firmly in place on her nose. "Hello, children," she called. "Come in and change your clothes." "Hello, Miss Pickett," Carol and Bobby answered. "How are you today?" "Fine," she said, as they came into the house. But I've been terribly busy. There have been a good many storms, you know. Yes, Carol said, waiting for Miss Pickett to go on. Carol had learned the best way to find out something from Miss Pickett was not to ask questions, but to look and listen. While she was looking and listening and changing into her skirt, Miss Pickett did go on. I just do not like the quarrels, the little old lady sighed. But every now and again rain does something foolish, and thunder gets mad, and lightning always gets into a fight. And it seems there's no one to make peace in the family but me. Oh, said Carol, waiting for more. But the tiny little lady shook her head and said, Dear me, what am I saying? How was school today, Carol? It was all right, answered Carol. We learned a new song. Carol stopped and struggled with the zipper on her play skirt. Oh, I've caught my zipper. Can you fix it for me, Miss Pickett? It's stuck tight. I think so. Step over here into the light. Instead of taking the zipper in her hands, Miss Pickett simply took off her big glasses. For ever so quick a minute, looked hard at the stuck zipper, and then whoosh! It zipped right to the top. Thank you, said Carol politely in a surprised voice. When they got downstairs, Bobby already had his chemical set laid out in the kitchen. I'm working on a new explosive, he announced. It says to put a little of this green chemical in with some of this blue, and it should blow up. That sounds rather dangerous, Miss Pickett said timidly. It won't really be a very loud explosion, Bobby explained. But it doesn't seem to work. I've already put some green in here and nothing happened. Put a little more out of the green bottle, Carol suggested. Bobby carefully added 2 more drops, and they waited. Still no explosion. Bobby held the tube high over the sink and added 3 more drops from the green bottle. They waited, and nothing happened. Perhaps I could help, Miss Pickett said quietly, and started to take off her glasses. But even before she had the glasses off of her nose, bang! And the mixture exploded by itself. It happened so suddenly that Bobby dropped the green bottle he held in his other hand. Carol jumped back 2 feet, and Miss Pickett's glasses flew out of her hand. It worked! Bobby cried happily when the noise was over. Boy, what an explosion! Carol said. Then the 2 of them noticed Miss Pickett with her eyes squeezed shut, feeling along the kitchen sink. Children, I'm afraid I've lost my glasses. Do you see them anywhere? Miss Pickett said in an excited voice. Well, how can you find them with your eyes shut? Bobby asked as he and Carol started looking around the kitchen. If I were to open my eyes, dear Bobby, the most amazing things would happen. While she spoke, without thinking, Miss Pickett did open her eyes to look at Bobby. Whoosh! And suddenly Bobby felt himself rise into the air, turn 2 flips, and sit firmly on top of the kitchen door. Hey! He cried in surprise. But at the same time, Miss Pickett's look had gone past Bobby and around the kitchen. The tea kettle on the stove began to whistle Dixie. The refrigerator door flew right open, and the lights flashed on and off merrily. The curtains at the windows began to flap and wave as a tremendous wind were blowing. The washing machine walked right in from the back porch, saying in a thick voice, At least I get to see what's in this other room. Quickly, Miss Pickett squeezed her eyes shut tight and everything righted itself. The tea kettle stopped singing, the refrigerator door shut tight again, the kitchen curtains were as before, and the washing machine returned quietly to the back porch. Bobby was standing on the floor again. You see, children, Miss Pickett said quietly, I can't very well open my eyes. You will just have to find my glasses for me. With that, Miss Pickett daintily sat down on the kitchen floor, holding her hands over her eyes now, just to be sure. Bobby and Carol quickly looked under the sink and behind the door. They looked everywhere for the lost glasses. Hello, we're home, we're back, a voice called from the driveway. It was Mother. They must have gotten back from Greenville sooner than they thought. "We're in the kitchen, Mother," Bobby called, not stopping his search for a single minute. When Mother and Daddy opened the back door, they stopped in surprise. There was little old Miss Pickett sitting in the middle of the kitchen floor with her hands over her eyes. Bobby was on his hands and knees searching under the stove. Carol's head was halfway behind the refrigerator. "What on earth?" Mother started. But before she could finish, Bobby shouted, "Hey, here they are under the stove." Very carefully, he placed the big black rimmed glasses in Miss Pickett's hands. Without once opening her eyes, she put the glasses firmly in place on her nose. Then, lifting herself from the floor, she turned to Mother. "We had a little explosion," she explained timidly, "and my glasses got lost. But everything is all right now. I'm ready to go any time you wish to drive me home." "Fine," Daddy said, still a little surprised at all the confusion. After Miss Pickett had left, Carol explained very carefully to Mother how they put a little too much of Bobby's green chemical into the blue, and the explosion had surprised them all. She didn't tell Mother about the strange things that happened while Miss Pickett's glasses were lost. But always after that, Carol was a little more careful how she handled the tea kettle, and always managed to close the refrigerator door very gently. Miss Pickett catches a thief. "I almost hate to leave," Mother said as she put on her coat. "Charles, I think we should tell Miss Pickett all about it." "Do if you'd like," he answered. "But after all, we'll only be gone hours." Miss Pickett was already settled into the living room, and the little old lady had selected a magazine and was sitting in Daddy's armchair by the big lamp. "Miss Pickett," Mother began, "I think you should know the children were quite excited when I put them to bed. They may wake in the night. There has been a thief in our neighborhood lately, and he's broken into a number of houses near here. No one has been hurt. He's just after jewels and valuables, but I thought you should know. Charles made sure all the doors were locked, and since we're only going to the movie, I think you'll be quite safe. We won't be gone more than 3 hours. You're not afraid, are you?" "Oh, my, no," Miss Pickett said. "I'll just sit here and read. You go ahead and enjoy the show." About an hour after Mother and Daddy had left, in the darkened bedroom upstairs, Bobby whispered, "Carol, are you awake, Carol?" Was her answer. "Carol, wake up. Miss Pickett's downstairs, and I'm going down. Do you want to come with?" Carol's sleepy voice said, "Huh? Miss Pickett? Yeah, I'll come. I'm going to ask her to make the tea kettle whistle Dixie again. That was the funniest thing I've ever heard. Come on, Carol, if you're coming." "She'll be angry at us for getting up," Carol said, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Well, we can always say we wanted a drink of water," Bobby suggested. "You can get a drink of water up here, and you know it, and so does Miss Pickett," Carol answered. "I don't care. I'll say I want a drink of kitchen water," Bobby said. "Come on now if you want to come with." Very quietly, the two children left their bedroom and started down the stairs. The house was quite dark, and they could see only one light on in the living room. At the bottom of the stairs, Carol stopped. "I hear her in the dining room, but it's dark in there. What could she be doing in the dark?" "It sounds like she's looking for something in the dining room," Bobby whispered. "But Miss Pickett could be doing anything." They started to tiptoe through the living room, but at the doorway, Carol and Bobby stopped short. There, in Daddy's armchair by the lamp, was little Miss Pickett. An open magazine lay in her lap, but she wasn't reading. She was sound asleep. Her snow-white hair shone in the lamplight, and her big black-rimmed glasses were firmly in place on her nose. Bobby thought it was strange to see someone asleep with glasses on, but in Miss Pickett's case, he guessed it was probably for the best. Then, two pairs of eyes popped open with the same thought. If Miss Pickett was asleep in the armchair, who was in the dining room? They listened and heard again more footsteps. Someone was definitely in there, and it was not Miss Pickett. Very quietly, Bobby and Carol tiptoed toward the armchair. Carol touched Miss Pickett's shoulder without saying a word, and nodded toward the dining room as soon as the little old lady's bright eyes opened. Luckily, Miss Pickett didn't make a sound. Right away, she heard the footsteps, too. Slowly and quietly, she got up from the chair and moved towards the dining room. The door was open just enough for 3 pairs of eyes to peek through. As soon as her eyes became used to the darkness, Carol saw a man in the dining room. He had a big sack on the table and was taking all the silverware out of the drawers. This was the thief. Carol wanted to run, but she felt frozen to the spot where she stood. Miss Pickett seemed to be waiting for something, and indeed she was. The thief had just put a handful of silver into the big bag and turned towards the drawer for more. Just as he had both hands in the drawer, Miss Pickett switched on the dining room light, and in the same minute took off her glasses and looked straight and hard at the silverware drawer, and with a bang the drawer closed on the thief's hands. "Ouch!" he yelled. "What?" he yelled. He was dancing up and down with pain, trying to pull his hands out of the drawer, but the drawer stayed shut and held tight. "Carol, call the police," Miss Pickett said in a soft voice. Not for one instant did she take her eyes off the silverware drawer. What? What do I do?" Carol stammered, still frightened to move. "Bobby, you do it," Miss Pickett said. "Just pick up the phone and ask for police. Tell them we have the thief here. Tell them to come and get him." Bobby rushed to the telephone in the hall. At first, he wasn't sure if his voice would work at all. But when the operator answered, he said, "Police, I want the police. Hurry." "No hurry," Miss Pickett called from the dining room. "Just be sure they understand you." "Hello," Bobby said when the captain at the police station answered. "This is Bobby Akin. We've caught a thief. He's stuck in our silverware drawer. Will you please come and get him?" "You've what?" the voice on the phone asked. "We've caught the thief," Bobby repeated. "Come and get him. He was taking all of my mother's silverware." "Where do you live, Bobby?" the captain asked. "I live at 205 East Drive. Miss Pickett says there's no hurry, but come as soon as you can, please." "Be right there," the captain answered, and the phone clicked in Bobby's ear. "They're coming right away," Bobby called as he hurried toward the dining room. "Is he still there?" "Of course he's still here," Miss Pickett answered. Never for an instant did she take her eyes off the drawer. She held her big black-rimmed glasses in her hand and just kept looking hard and straight at the silverware drawer. The thief was still struggling to get loose when the police car came screaming to a stop in front of the house. It was Carol who opened the door for the 4 policemen. "Is this 205 East Drive?" one of the policemen asked. Carol only nodded, because she couldn't take her eyes off the gun in the policeman's hand. "Where's the thief?" the captain asked as he came in the house. "He's right in here," Bobby called. "Come in the dining room." "Hands up in there, I'm coming in," the policeman said as he entered the dining room. "Don't shoot me, copper," the thief begged. "I can't put my hands up. I can't get him out of this blasted drawer." Slowly, Miss Pickett put her glasses back on and stepped out of the dining room. The silverware drawer opened and the thief's hands were free, but only for a minute because the captain quickly fastened the handcuffs. When the other policemen had taken the thief away, the captain questioned Miss Pickett. "Do you mean he actually got his hands caught in that drawer and couldn't get loose? That's the strangest thing I've ever heard of." "Yes," Miss Pickett agreed. "It is strange, isn't it? But that drawer is like any other drawer. It opens and closes. How could it have stayed shut so tight?" The captain took off his cap and scratched his head. "Some things are just hard to understand," Miss Pickett said. The house was full of people now. Some of the neighbors had to come in when they heard the police car drive up. 2 men from the newspaper were taking pictures with bright flashing lights, and over by the door, Carol saw Mother and Daddy just home from the movie. "Mother!" Carol cried, running toward them. "We caught the thief. Bobby and I heard him, and then Miss Pickett turned the light and took off her..." Carol stopped in the middle, not sure what to say. In all the confusion, no one seemed to notice. It was almost an hour before the neighbors, the reporters, and the police captain left. Mother hurried the children back to bed, and Daddy drove little Miss Pickett home. The next morning at breakfast, when Daddy opened the paper, there on the front page was a picture of Miss Pickett, Carol, and Bobby. A long story of how they caught the thief, which was also in the picture. Well, look at this. Not a bad picture of you two, Daddy said to the children, who were leaning over his shoulder. But you can hardly see Miss Pickett's face behind those big black-rimmed glasses. Wonder why she wears them all the time. They're not at all becoming. She doesn't wear them all the time. Sometimes she takes them off, Carol said, winking at Bobby. The big bear is lost. We really must get a new doormat, Mother said, to no one in particular, as she waited on the front porch. Uh-huh, Carol answered, not taking her eyes off the book. The Stars in the Sky was a book Carol had brought home from the library. She was learning many new things about the stars. It was a warm summer evening, and still daylight. Bobby was out playing somewhere, but Carol and Mother had sat together on the front porch. What did you say? Carol turned, realizing her mother had just spoken. I just mentioned that we need a new doormat, her mother answered. This one's all frayed and worn. Oh, here they come. The car stopped at the curb. Daddy got out to open the door for little Miss Pickett. The tiny old lady stepped daintily out of the car with the shoebox under her arm, for she had come to spend the night. Her big, black-rimmed glasses were firmly in place on her nose. Good evening, Miss Pickett, Mother greeted her. Hasn't it been a lovely day? I see you brought your things. The bed's all ready for you, like usual. We shall be very likely to be quite late tonight. Carol marked her place in her book and stood up to speak to Miss Pickett. Now, where's Bobby? Mother said. We don't want to leave till he's home. Bobby! Bobby! She called louder and louder. Bobby, come home now! Bobby, we're ready to go! Bobby didn't appear. He could be down the block in Mike's backyard or over in the school playground, but whenever he was, he didn't come. If he doesn't hurry, we'll be late, Daddy said. Then he started to call, Robert! Robert, we're waiting for you! Mother and Daddy stepped off the porch in the front yard and called even louder. Bobby, called Mother. Robert, called Daddy. Then Carol saw Miss Pickett slowly take off her big black-rimmed glasses from her nose and look just once all around the neighborhood. Down the street came Bobby in a big hurry, as if it were a great wind pushing him and he couldn't stop. Bobby blew right up to the front gate and sat down with a bump. Miss Pickett's glasses were back on her nose now. I was right in the middle of a game, Bobby said, picking himself up and looking at the ping-pong paddle still in his hand. But I came anyway. Bobby wasn't quite sure how, but Carol had seen Miss Pickett take off her heavy glasses, and she knew. Good, Bobby, Mother said. You can return the paddle tomorrow. We wanted you to be home before we left. Besides, it's almost 7 o'clock. Good night, all. Mother and Daddy were in the car and on their way. Miss Pickett turned and entered the house. It's time, was all she said, but Bobby and Carol understood and followed her up the stairs. While the children got ready for bed, the little old lady opened her shoebox and took out her bright blue nightgown, her tiny bright blue slippers, and her fluffy pillow. She was just placing them on the cot when Carol spoke. Miss Pickett, this book I got from the library is all about stars. There's a picture of a comet on page 15, and the chapter I'm reading now is all about constellations. But I don't quite understand constellations. Long ago, Miss Pickett started, people didn't know what the stars were or how they got them in the sky. So people made up stories about them. One group of stars is called a hunter, and another a scorpion. Those things aren't really in the sky, are they? Carol questioned. It's just some stories people made up, isn't it? Well, that's what the book tells us, Miss Pickett said. Does your book mention Big Bear and Little Bear? Yes, only it has another name for them too. It's right here somewhere. Carol answered as she looked quickly through the book. It calls them Big Dipper and Little Dipper. There are two names, but they're the same constellations. Come over here by the window and I can show you those two. They're always in the sky, Miss Pickett said. It was just getting dark enough to see the stars. Carol stood close by Miss Pickett while she pointed north. Let me see the bears too, Bobby cried as he joined them at the window. That group of stars right there, Miss Pickett said, make up the little bear, and right above them, that other group. What? What in heaven? Miss Pickett never finished her sentence, but Carol and Bobby could tell by her voice that something was terribly gone wrong. Carol noticed, too, that there was no group of stars above the little bear. Oh, that naughty bear, Miss Pickett said, more to herself than anyone else. Quickly, children, get your bathrobes and slippers on. I can't leave you here alone, and I have work to do. You'll just have to come with me. Without another word, Miss Pickett turned to her shoebox and took out the longest black cape the children had ever seen. She quickly slipped it over her shoulders. It covered all of her, from her chin to the tips of her pointed shoes. She then took out a tall black hat and placed it firmly on her snow-white hair. Bobby noticed that the hat had shiny little stars scattered all over it. Into your bathrobes quickly, Miss Pickett spoke to the children. We have no time to lose. Bobby and Carol were in their bathrobes in a jiffy, and as soon as their slippers were on, they chased after Miss Pickett, who was already halfway down the stairs. We can't possibly walk, Miss Pickett said, as she opened the front door. Here, this will do. Stand close behind me now. Miss Pickett planted herself right in the middle of the doormat. Bobby stood on one side and Carol on the other. Without another word, she took off her big black-rimmed glasses and looked one hard, straight look at the old doormat. The doormat began to move. It lifted a few feet off the ground and moved right down the front walk, out the gate, and down the street. Bobby and Carol saw Mike's house and the school playground as they floated past. The old doormat began to move faster and faster. They were now moving so fast the houses and trees were nothing but a blur. The wind blew through Carol's hair, and Bobby felt his bathrobe flapping against his knees. It was quite dark now, and the children held on tight to Miss Pickett. At last, they were out of the city. Maybe they passed through several cities. Carol couldn't really be sure. Suddenly, the doormat began to slow down. It stopped right on the edge of a great forest. You must come with me. You won't be safe here alone, Miss Pickett said, stepping off the doormat. Bobby and Carol were beside her in an instant. Together, they started off through the forest. Miss Pickett led them to a large clearing near the center of the forest, and there, beside an old log by the light of the moon, Carol and Bobby saw all the bears. More bears than they had ever seen. They all seemed to be very busy around the big log. Then Carol smelled the honey. The bears were having a feast. Don't be afraid, children, Miss Pickett said softly. Stay close to me. Then the little old lady took off her big glasses and put them in a pocket of her big black cape. Never had Bobby or Carol seen Miss Pickett put her glasses away. She stepped right up beside the bears and said in a loud, firm voice, I am here. And as if by signal, all the bears stepped back from the log and bowed low. In a line now, Miss Pickett commanded. I'm looking for the big bear, and I have a feeling he's here among you. With much shuffling of heavy feet, the bears lined up in a single line. The line of bears stretched from one end of the clearing to the other. And then very slowly, Miss Pickett with Carol and Bobby, as close beside her as they could get, walked down the line. She looked very carefully at each bear she passed. To Bobby, all the bears looked exactly alike. Oh, some were smaller than others, and some had honey on their big paws, but they all had tiny furry ears and great brown faces and heavily clawed paws. Miss Pickett was almost at the end of the line when she stopped. Here you are, she said. What do you mean leaving your place? The great brown bear, the biggest in all the line, hung his head as little Miss Pickett scolded him. Carol noticed one difference between this big bear and all the others. This bear's eyes sparkled just like the stars. You have no business being here. I just happened to look for you tonight, and what did I see? There was Little Bear in his place, faithful as ever, and in the great space in the sky, right where you should be. Right back up there, right now, and quickly. Carol had never heard Miss Pickett speak so loudly or with such authority. Then, while Miss Pickett looked straight and hard at the biggest bear of all with his shining eyes, the great animal rose slowly from the ground and disappeared above them in the dark night. Back to your feast now, the rest of you, Miss Pickett spoke to the other bears. Then she turned and left the clearing to start back through the forest. Carol and Bobby stayed close at her heels. Once again, the three of them crowded on the doormat. After the old mat had received Miss Pickett's iconic look, it lifted and started them on their way home. Fast as the wind, the doormat traveled. Before it seemed possible, they were slowing down, passing the schoolyard and Mike's house, and then floating up their own front walk. The doormat settled gently right down before the door. Once up in the bedroom, Miss Pickett took out her big black-rimmed glasses, back on her nose, and took off her cape and hat. To Carol's surprise, the great cape and the hat fitted neatly in the tiny shoebox. In bed now, the two of you, Miss Pickett said softly. It's way later than you think. Suddenly, Carol and Bobby were terribly sleepy. Their eyes could hardly stay open. One thing, Carol, before you get in bed, Miss Pickett was motioning towards the window again. As I was saying, right out there are big and little bears. The group of stars is the little bear, and the larger group right above it is the big bear. Now, good night. Miss Pickett was pointing out the window, and Carol, through sleepy eyes, saw the stars she meant. In the morning, when Bobby and Carol woke, Daddy had already taken Miss Pickett home, and at breakfast Mother was full of news about the movie they'd seen the night before. It's a splendid picture, Carol. We'll drive you and Bobby down Saturday afternoon so you can see it too. What were the names of those movie stars, Charles? Stars? Carol repeated foolishly. What's the matter with you two? Daddy asked. You aren't hearing a word we say. You look so sleepy. Did you even get to bed on time? We were ready for bed even before 7:30, Bobby was quick to say. It was later that evening when the children were once more in bed, and Mother spoke to Daddy. I got a new doormat for the front door today. That old worn one is shabby, but it was the strangest thing. Bobby wouldn't let me throw this old one away. He said he wanted it in his room. Can you imagine any reason why? Blue sawdust. Bobby and Carol were the first in the neighborhood to see the Bright Circus posters. The circus would be in town July 7th, 8th, and 9th. For weeks, they could go on talking about nothing else. When can we go, Mother? Did you get the tickets? Are they good seats? Will Daddy go too? Yes, yes, Mother said 100 times. We'll all four go Saturday afternoon. Daddy has the tickets. You may keep them in your room if you like. Your father and I are almost as anxious to see the circus as you are. Then, on Friday, the worst thing in the world happened. Bobby had a cold. His face was hot and red, and Mother put him right to bed, and Dr. Miller came before supper. It looks like a bad one, the doctor told Mother in the hall. Those pills will break the fever, but young Bobby should stay in bed for at least 4 days. Bobby heard the last part and cried out loud, Oh, no, not 4 days. I've got to get up tomorrow. We're going to go see the circus. I can't stay in bed for 4 whole days. As the doctor had left, Mother tried to explain. You will catch more of a cold if you go out, Bobby. Besides, you might give your cold to someone else. There's nothing to do but keep you here in bed. I'm sorry, but you'll have to miss the circus. There's always going to be another one next summer. Oh, but next summer seems 100 years away, Bobby complained. Why did I have to get this old cold now anyway? His eyes were full of tears. Bobby, Mother went on, you don't want Carol and the rest of us to miss the circus too, do you? You'll have to be the best patient you know how. I'll call Miss Pickett to come and stay with you tomorrow while we're gone. You always like having her here. Do you want to give your ticket to one of your friends? Yeah, I guess so. Give it to Mike. I'll be okay if Miss Pickett comes. And I won't cry anymore. Only I think having a cold is the meanest thing in the whole world. Carol slept with Mother that night, and then Saturday morning she called to Bobby from the bedroom doorway. What color balloon do you want, red or blue? I don't care, was Bobby's answer. Well, sure you do. I'm going to see everything twice, Carol went on. Then I'll come home and tell you all about it. I'm sorry you had to get a cold just now. Mike was real pleased with your ticket. He's going with us. He's sorry you have a cold too. It doesn't do much good to be sorry, Bobby thought as he lay in his bed. I'm the one who's got the cold, and they get to go right ahead and see the circus. Later, Carol called into the room again. Miss Pickett's here, Bobby. She's coming right up. You'll have fun with her. Let me know if anything special happens, you know. We're leaving now. Goodbye. Mother and Daddy both came to say goodbye. They promised to remember everything and tell Bobby about the whole circus when they got home. When the front door closed behind them, little old Miss Pickett in her snow-white hair, nodded at the top of her head, and her big black-rimmed glasses firmly in place, sat daintily on the chair beside Bobby's bed. Your mother said you were to drink this juice, Miss Pickett said softly. I don't want any old juice, Bobby answered crossly. Would you like a glass of water? Miss Pickett suggested. No, I don't want any water either. Well, Bobby, what is it that you want? I want to see the circus, Bobby cried louder than was really necessary. His eyes filled with tears again. Well, if that's all, Miss Pickett said softly, you shall see the circus. The way she said it made Bobby wonder, but he spoke through the tears. Oh, I've got a nasty old cold and I can't get out of bed for more than 4 days. Dr. Miller even said so, and the circus will be over and gone by then. Never you mind, Miss Pickett continued. You shall see the circus this very afternoon. The little old lady walked daintily across the room to the toy chest. The wooden chest was filled with toys that Bobby and Carol had played with years ago, but never wanted to throw away. Miss Pickett leaned over and lifted several toys out of the chest. She brought the round blue rug out of the bathroom and placed it in the middle of the bedroom floor. On the round rug, she put the toys. There was an old polka dot horse. Its tail was ragged and almost pulled loose. When Bobby had been a baby, he had slept with the polka dot horse every night. Miss Pickett put a big gray elephant on the rug, too. Then 3 small monkeys. She put the horse in the middle of the rug, and Carol's old dancing girl beside it. Oh, those old toys, Bobby said from his bed. That's not like a real circus. It will be, Bobby, was all Miss Pickett said. Then before Bobby could protest, she slipped his robe around his shoulders, fluffed his pillows, and sat him up in bed. The round blue rug is almost like a circus ring, isn't it, Bobby? There are horses and elephants and dancing girls in the circus, aren't there, Bobby? Miss Pickett said as she sat down beside him. Oh, but that's not the same, Bobby moaned. Now, Bobby, Miss Pickett continued, as if he hadn't said a word, you take my glasses and look at the toy animals on the rug. I'll look at them without my glasses. Puzzled, Bobby watched while Miss Pickett took the big black-rimmed glasses off and handed them to him. She turned and looked straight at the blue rug. Putting the glasses on his own nose, Bobby noticed that they just fit. Then he looked at the blue rug and everything started to change. The bedroom walls seemed to fall back, and as if he were sitting right there in the big main tent. The circus ring was right before him. It still looked a little blue, and the band was playing, and the show was about to begin. "Ladies and gentlemen," a man in a black suit and tall hat called loudly, "you are about to see the most fantastic, the most stupendous, the most gigantic circus ever held. You'll see elephants and ponies and dancing girls. You'll see the most amazing tricks, the funniest clowns, and the most daring trapeze artists ever beheld by the human eye. Ladies and gentlemen, the most fantastic, the most stupendous, the most gigantic circus ever held is about to begin." The trumpet sounded, and 6 ponies came prancing into the ring. Each of the ponies had a bright polka dot blanket over its back, and the ringmaster cracked his whip while the ponies were jumping over tables and through great flaming hoops. Bobby saw the whole thing. He saw the elephants, 10 of them, holding on to each other's tails and walking in a great circle. He saw them stand on their hind feet and roar, and then kneel before the audience. Bobby saw the clowns set a house on fire right in the circus ring. More clowns rushed in with an old bright red fire engine that puffed clouds of smoke. He laughed and laughed as the clowns tried to put out the fire with water pistols. Bobby saw the man on the flying trapeze swing and leap for the net rope. He held his breath till the man was safe on the high platform again. The dancing girls came riding in on the backs of 6 ponies. The girls stood on their hands and even their heads while the ponies trotted around the blue ring. Bobby saw the whole show. At last, all the clowns came back into the ring and bowed so low their chins touched the sawdust. One of them fell over and got his foot caught when he tried to get up. The circus band played louder than ever, and then the show was over. Bobby took off Miss Pickett's black-rimmed glasses and looked about his room. There on the floor, just as she had set them, were the old toys on the bathroom rug. He turned to Miss Pickett in surprise, but she was giving him a straight, hard look. "You must be very sleepy," she said. Suddenly, Bobby was very sleepy. He lay back on the pillows as Miss Pickett lifted her heavy glasses out of his hand. "That sure was some circus," was all Bobby had to say before he was fast asleep. It was almost an hour later that Miss Pickett heard the rest of the family come in the front door. Carol rushed more quickly than the others straight to Bobby's room. Carol threw open the door, but Miss Pickett's voice stopped her short. "Carol, you don't want to catch Bobby's cold," the little old lady said softly. "Stay right there by the door. Besides, he's asleep." Mother and Daddy were all at the door now. They entered quietly. "Has he been all right?" Mother whispered. "Oh, he's been just fine," Miss Pickett answered, adjusting her big glasses more firmly on her nose. "He's been asleep for the last hour." A murmur came from Bobby as he awoke. Are you home? How was the circus? Tell me all about it." "Your cold seems much better now, Bobby," Mother said. "Oh, you haven't had any fever at all." "I'm okay," Bobby answered. "But tell me about the circus." "Oh, Bobby," Carol cried. "It was the most fantastic, the most stupendous, the most gigantic circus ever held. The big circus ring was filled with blue sawdust and—" "Blue sawdust?" Bobby sat up, bed surprised. "Yes, bright blue. And there were dozens of clowns, the funniest ever. They set a house on fire right in the circus ring, and then—" "Did they try to put it out with water pistols?" Bobby interrupted. "Yes! How did you know? And Bobby, the horses all had polka dot blankets. You remember the old toy horse you used to sleep with? They looked just like that." "They did they?" Bobby grinned and looked towards Miss Pickett with a wink. But the little old lady was putting on her coat and getting ready to leave. Without a word, she went downstairs with Mother and Daddy. When they all left the room, Bobby said in a loud whisper, "Carol, I don't mind if I didn't get to go with you. I saw the circus too." "How could you, Bobby? You've been in bed, haven't you?" Carol was amazed. "I did see it in a way," Bobby whispered. "You see, Miss Pickett took her glasses off, and I put them on." "Oh, you put on Miss Pickett's glasses? Oh, that's swell, Bobby. I'm glad you didn't miss the circus. Here's your red balloon," Carol laughed as she tossed the balloon toward his bed. "You didn't get one of those, too, did you?" Fire, fire. Mother was going to give a speech at the women's club lunchroom. She didn't want to lock the house and leave Bobby and Carol outside or inside, so Miss Pickett was asked to come and babysit. When Miss Pickett arrived, Mother adjusted her hat once more and rushed out the door with a hurried goodbye and a hasty remark about not being late this time. Though it had been some time since the children had seen Miss Pickett, nothing had changed. Her snow-white hair was pulled in a knot on the top of her head, and her big black-rimmed glasses sat firmly in place on her nose. "School will be starting soon, won't it, Carol?" she asked in her strange, soft voice. "Just 3 more weeks," Carol answered. "I'll be glad. Vacation has been long enough." "Long enough," Bobby was quick to say. "It couldn't have been long enough for me." "Well, you two run out and play. I'll just sit here and read," Miss Pickett said, settling herself in Daddy's big chair. "What'll we do?" Bobby asked Carol once they were outside. "You can get your bicycle and we'll ride through the park," Carol suggested. "Can't. I left my bike to Mike this morning." "We could roller skate instead." 4 skates were buckled on 4 feet in less time than it takes to tell. Bobby and Carol were off down the street toward the park. But then they got no further than the schoolyard. A crowd of excited neighbors was beginning to gather. Bobby and Carol stopped to see what was going on. Then Bobby noticed the bicycle shed was on fire. "Hey, Carol, it's a fire. Let's go see it. Come on." Carol followed Bobby across the street. "Boy, look at that old shed burn. Has anybody turned in the fire alarm?" Bobby called as they joined the crowd. "I did," Mike answered, running up beside them. "But they're sure a long time about coming. I was the first to see the fire." The old bicycle shed was built alongside one of the schoolyard, a little distance from the school itself. All last year, when Bobby rode his bicycle to school, he parked it in this shed. But now the little building was blazing with a great flame. It wouldn't take long for the old shed to burn to the ground. Luckily, there was no houses closer to the playground. The only other building in danger was the school. "Oh," Carol exclaimed, "that fire could spread and catch the school on fire, too. Stand back, Bobby." "Hurry," Bobby shouted foolishly. "Maybe the old school will burn, too. Then we'd have vacation forever." "Silly," Carol scolded. "We'd have school just the same, only all the good books and paper would be burned." "I don't care. I wish the fire'd get bigger and bigger and burn the whole school." Bobby was too excited to make sense. "No, Bobby, don't wish for the fire to get bigger," Mike said, as if each word were difficult to get out of his mouth. "Your bicycle is in that shed." "What? My bicycle? My bicycle is in there." Bobby wasn't enjoying the fire now. Mike explained, "I was riding it all around the neighborhood and parked it here so I could play baseball with the boys. But we had a good game till the fire started. The bicycle's in this end, nearest the school. The fire hasn't reached it yet. I hope the fire engine hurries." "My bicycle! Stop the fire! Stop the fire! Quick! My bike's in there!" Bobby ran up and down the edge of the playground, shouting frantically. Then Carol had a sudden thought. She knew one person who could put out this fire even before the fire engine came. In a flash, she was off down the street to get Miss Pickett. "Miss Pickett," Carol called as she skated up the front walk. "Come quickly. The bicycle shed's on fire. The school and Bobby's bicycle may burn too. Hurry, Miss Pickett." The little old lady popped out the front door and said, "What's that, Carol? What about a fire?" Carol pulled Miss Pickett along behind her and hurried back toward the schoolyard. Miss Pickett seemed to move awfully fast for such an old lady. But Carol had no time to wonder. On the way, she explained everything again. "The bicycle shed in the school is on fire. Bobby's bicycle is in there. The fire looks like it might spread to the schoolhouse, too. You've got to do something, Miss Pickett." Mike called the fire company, but they're not here yet. Carol was breathless by the time they reached the playground. The crowd had grown bigger now, and the bright flames were shooting higher than ever. Bobby was shouting louder than ever, and still the fire engine hadn't arrived. Miss Pickett adjusted her big black-rimmed glasses more firmly on her nose and looked at everything. A wind started to blow. The long red flames were reaching out toward the far end of the shed. Some flames licked right against the side of the school. "Stop it, Miss Pickett. Please put it out," Carol shouted above the noise. I can't, Carol, not in front of all these people, Miss Pickett whispered shyly, but I'll do what I can. Quickly, the little old lady took off her big black rimmed glasses and looked straight and hard at the fire. Suddenly, the wind stopped. The fire went back to one end of the shed and seemed to spread no further. The long frames were no longer reached out over the school shed, nor licked against the school. Clang, 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 the fire engine came charging up the street. Stand back, everybody, the chief shouted. Hurry, men, this fire could spread and be a bad one. It took the firemen several minutes to get the hose off the truck, connect it, and turn on the water. All the while, Miss Pickett kept looking at the fire, and the flames spread no further. At last, the firemen were shouting great streams of water on the bright flames, and the fire began to go out. Miss Pickett daintily placed her glasses back on her nose and started off down the street. Thank you, Carol whispered, but Miss Pickett didn't even seem to hear. On one end of the shed was nothing but a heap of charred, blackened boards, but the end nearest the school was badly scorched but still standing. As soon as the firemen would let them, Bobby and Mike rushed in to rescue the bicycle. Here it is, Mike called. It's hardly touched, but ouch! Those handlebars are hot. Be careful, Bobby. Once the bicycle was out of the playground and cooled off a little, the boys examined it carefully. The paint was blistered on the front fender, and the front tire had melted and was too soft to use. But otherwise, the bicycle wasn't hurt at all. My dad and I will get you a new tire, Bobby. Honest. And we'll have the front fender painted too. I'm awfully sorry, but how did I know the shed was going to burn? That's okay, Mike. It could have happened to anybody. Never mind about painting the fender. I kind of like it bumpy like that. Shows this bike had a real experience. Together the boys watched the fireman roll the hose once again, and the fire engine fastened the hydrant tight. Can't understand why the fire didn't spread, the chief said to one of the men. I'm surprised the whole shed didn't burn. If the whole shed had caught, the fireman said, the school would have burned too. Sure as my name's O'Reilly. Funny thing, it's almost seemed as if the fire was under control when we got here. Bobby listened to the men talk. Then way down the street he saw Miss Pickett turning through the gate to their house with Carol. Bobby knew why the fire hadn't spread, but he couldn't tell the firemen. They would not understand at all. Miss Pickett disappears. Carol rushed home from the school to tell Mother about the PTA meeting. It's tonight, Mother, in the auditorium, and you've just got to go. I want you to meet my new teacher. I know, Carol, Mother answered. I've got a notice in the morning mail. I've been trying to get Miss Pickett on the phone all day. I want her to come and stay with you, but she doesn't answer. Frankly, I'm worried about her. She's such a sweet little old lady, living all alone like that. Mother shook her head. Why, but anything could happen. Something's happened to Miss Pickett. Oh, no, Carol cried. Let's go and see her, Mother. Maybe she's sick or something. When your father comes home, we'll drive over and find out. She hasn't answered her phone all day. Carol told Bobby what Mother had said, and the two children suffered through the hour and a half before Dad came home. Sit down and eat now, Mother insisted. After supper, Dad will take you to find out about Miss Pickett. But I don't know where she lives, Dad said. You must know. You always go after her and take her home, Bobby cried. Dad shook his head. She always has me meet her on the corner of First and Magnolia, and I let her out there too. I really haven't any idea where she lives. Carol and Bobby were speechless. Well, she must live somewhere near there. You three can go to First and Magnolia and ask, Mother decided. Bobby and Carol had their coats on before Dad was even up from the table. At last they were in the car on their way, and they arrived at the corner of First and Magnolia. Dad said, There's no place I can park. You two jump out and ask in that apartment house on the corner. I'll drive around the block and pick you up in a minute. At the apartment house desk, Carol spoke to the man. Does a Miss Pickett live here? She's our babysitter, and we're afraid something has happened to her. The man answered, No. We have a Miss Packard, but no Miss Pickett. She must live here, Bobby insisted. This is the only apartment house in the neighborhood. Sorry, I've never heard of your Miss Pickett. And the man turned away. Out on the sidewalk again, Carol and Bobby looked up and down the street. There was a filing station and two grocery stores, but they were all dark. No one was no one else was on the street except a newsboy standing on the opposite corner. How can we ever find her? Carol sighed. It would take all night to go to each house and ask if they know Miss Pickett. Hey, the newspaper boy called. Did you say Miss Pickett? Yes. Do you know her? Bobby ran toward him. Sure, I know her. Are you Carol and Bobby? Why, yes. How did you know that? Miss Pickett left this note for you. She had to go away, the newspaper boy said. Carol and Bobby raced for the bright spot under the streetlight and looked at the folded piece of paper the newsboy handed them. Hope your mother can find another babysitter. I was called away very suddenly. Put this at the very bottom of the toy chest. Signed, Miss Pickett. That was all it said. But, Bobby stammered, it doesn't say why or where she'll be back or... What does she want to put this note at the bottom of the toy chest? Carol wondered. They heard Dad honk the horn and quickly ran towards the car. Daddy, she's gone out of town. She left a note for us with the newsboy, Carol explained. I thought it would be something like that, said Dad. They drove the rest of the way home in silence. Mother wanted to see the note. Well, I'm glad it's nothing serious. We'll probably never find another babysitter as good as Miss Pickett, she said. No, Carol agreed sadly. There'll never be another like Miss Pickett. Why on earth do you guess she wanted you to put this note at the bottom of your toy chest? Mother asked. But you may as well do it. Get ready for bed first, though. It's already after 7. She handed the note to Carol. It didn't take Carol and Bobby long to get in their pajamas. They started lifting all the toys out of the chest. Bobby looked sadly at the old polka-dot horse as he placed on the floor. What's this box down here at the bottom? He asked Carol. I didn't know there was a box in the chest. It's a shoebox, isn't it? Carol exclaimed as Bobby lifted it out. It's Miss Pickett's shoebox. Open it quickly, Bobby. It really was Miss Pickett's shoebox, and in it were Miss Pickett's black-rimmed glasses. That's why she wanted us to put the note at the very bottom of the toy chest. She wanted us to find the glasses, Carol cried. Look through them, Bobby, and see what happens. Bobby put the big glasses on his nose, but nothing happened. Carol put the glasses on her nose. The children waited, but nothing happened. I guess the glasses won't work without Miss Pickett here, too, Bobby said, disappointed. With the glasses still on her nose, Carol looked at Miss Pickett's note again. Hey, Bobby, there's some words here we couldn't see. Bobby looked at the paper in her hand. No, it's just the same, he said. But through the glasses it's different. Put them on and see. Why, it is, Bobby cried when he had the glasses on. It says, Remember, a secret is only as fun as long as it stays a secret. Put the glasses in the toy chest for me, and I'll need them when I come back. And now, into bed, you two. It's exactly 7:30. Signed, Miss Pickett. Carol turned to look at the clock, and it was exactly 7:30. Quickly, they put the glasses and the note in the shoebox. They placed the box on the bottom of the toy chest and piled all the old toys on top. As Carol jumped into bed, she cried, Bobby, do you realize what Miss Pickett said when I come back? Whenever she has gone, she'll be back sometime. And when she does, she'll know right where to find her big black-rimmed glasses, Bobby said, as he turned out the light. And that was The Peculiar Miss Pickett by Nancy R. Julian.